Yes, there is a requirement per code to have a clearance in front of a 24 volts AC panel. A National Electrical Code, or NEC, requires a minimum working space of 30 inches in front of electrical equipment, including 24 volts AC panels, to allow for safe operation and maintenance. This requirement is specified in NEC Article 110.26, A1, which states, working space. Sufficient space shall be provided and maintained about electrical equipment to permit ready and safe operation and maintenance of such equipment. The NEC also provides additional guidance on the specific dimensions of the working space required in front of electrical equipment in Table 110.26, A1. For 24 volts AC panels, the minimum working space required is 30 inches. This means that there must be at least 30 inches of clear space in front of the panel to allow for safe operation and maintenance. Any obstructions, such as walls, cabinets, or other equipment, must be kept at least 30 inches away from the front of the panel. It is important to note that the 30-inch working space requirement for 24 volts AC panels is different from the 36-inch working space requirement for 120 volts AC panels. This is because 120 volts AC panels are typically larger and require more space for safe operation and maintenance. The working space requirements around the electrical equipment are crucial for ensuring the safety of personnel who may be working on or near the equipment. These requirements are outlined in detail in the National Electrical Code, specifically in Article 110.26. The primary reason for maintaining adequate working space is to provide enough room for electricians and other qualified personnel to safely operate, maintain, and repair electrical equipment. This includes tasks such as inspecting connections, tightening screws, replacing components, and troubleshooting problems. Without sufficient space, workers may be forced to contort their bodies or work in awkward positions, increasing the risk of accidents and injuries. The NEC specifies minimum dimensions for the working space based on the voltage of the equipment and the presence of exposed live parts. The higher the voltage, the greater the required working space. This is because higher voltage equipment poses a greater risk of electrical shock, and workers need more room to maneuver and avoid contact with energized parts. In addition to the minimum dimensions, the NEC also requires that the working space be clear of obstructions. This means that there should be no walls, partitions, equipment, or other objects that could impede access to the electrical equipment. Obstructions can make it difficult for workers to reach the equipment, increasing the risk of accidents. The NEC also addresses the issue of illumination in the working space. Adequate lighting is essential for workers to see what they are doing and avoid hazards. The NEC requires that the working space be illuminated with sufficient light to allow workers to safely perform their tasks. Furthermore, the NEC mandates that the working space be kept in a clean and orderly condition. This means that there should be no debris, tools, or other materials that could create a tripping hazard or make it difficult to access the equipment. A clean and orderly working space promotes safety and efficiency. The specific dimensions of the working space required by the NEC depend on several factors, including the voltage of the equipment, the location of the equipment, and the presence of exposed live parts. For equipment operating at 600 volts or less, the NEC specifies 3 different working space steps, which are defined as Condition 1, Condition 2, and Condition 3. Condition 1 applies where there are no exposed live parts on one side of the working space and the opposite side is grounded. In this case, the minimum working space depth is 3 feet for equipment operating at 150 volts or less, 3 feet for equipment operating between 151 volts and 600 volts. Condition 2 applies where there are exposed live parts on one side of the working space and the opposite side is also exposed live parts or is insulated. In this case, the minimum working space depth is 3 feet for equipment operating at 150 volts or less, 3.5 feet for equipment operating between 151 volts and 600 volts. Condition 3 applies where there are exposed live parts on both sides of the working space. In this case, The minimum working space depth is 4 feet for equipment operating at 150 volts or less, 4 feet for equipment operating between 151 volts and 600 volts. In addition to the working space depth, the NEC also specifies minimum working space width and height. The working space width must be at least 30 inches, or the width of the equipment, whichever is greater. The working space height must be at least 6.5 feet, or the height of the equipment, whichever is greater. It is important to note that these are just the minimum working space requirements. In some cases, it may be necessary to provide more working space to ensure the safety of personnel. For example, if the equipment is located in a confined space, it may be necessary to provide additional working space to allow workers to maneuver safely. Similarly, if the equipment is located in a hazardous location, it may be necessary to provide additional working space to allow workers to escape in the event of an emergency. In addition to the NEC requirements, there may also be local codes or regulations that specify additional working space requirements. It is important to check with the local authorities to determine if there are any additional requirements that apply to your specific situation. Maintaining adequate working space around electrical equipment is essential for ensuring the safety of personnel. By following the NEC requirements and any applicable local codes or regulations, you can help to prevent accidents and injuries. Here are some additional tips for maintaining adequate working space around electrical equipment. Firstly, keep the working space clear of obstructions. Secondly, ensure that the working space is adequately illuminated. Thirdly, keep the working space in a clean and orderly condition. Fourthly, provide additional working space if necessary. Fifthly, check with the local authorities for any additional requirements. Sixthly, train personnel on the importance of maintaining adequate working space. Seventhly, regularly inspect the working space to ensure that it is in compliance with the NEC requirements. Eighthly, address any safety concerns immediately. Ninthly, document all inspections and corrective actions. Tenthly, stay up to date on the latest NEC requirements and any applicable local codes or regulations. By following these tips, you can help to create a safe and efficient working environment for personnel who may be working on or near electrical equipment. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, is a comprehensive set of standards that govern the safe installation and maintenance of electrical systems. One of the key aspects covered by the NEC is the provision of adequate working space around electrical equipment. This working space is essential for ensuring the safety of electricians and other qualified personnel who may need to access the equipment for maintenance, repair, or inspection purposes. Article 110.26 of the NEC specifically addresses the requirements for working space around electrical equipment operating at 600 volts or less. This section outlines the minimum dimensions for the working space, as well as other important considerations such as access, illumination, and headroom. The minimum depth of the working space is determined by the voltage of the equipment and the conditions of the surrounding environment. The NEC specifies 3 different working space depths, which are designated as Condition 1, Condition 2, and Condition 3. Condition 1 applies when there are no exposed live parts on one side of the working space and the opposite side is grounded. Condition 2 applies when there are exposed live parts on one side of the working space and the opposite side is also exposed live parts or is insulated. Condition 3 applies when there are exposed live parts on both sides of the working space. For equipment operating at 150 volts or less, the minimum working space depth is 3 feet for all 3 conditions. For equipment operating between 151 volts and 600 volts, the minimum working space depth is 3 feet for Condition 1, 3.5 feet for Condition 2, and 4 feet for Condition 3. In addition to the minimum depth, the working space must also have a minimum width of 30 inches or the width of the equipment, whichever is greater. This ensures that workers have enough room to move around and perform their tasks safely. The working space must also have a minimum headroom of 6.5 feet, or the height of the equipment, whichever is greater. This provides adequate vertical clearance for workers to stand and work comfortably. The NEC also requires that the working space be readily accessible. This means that there should be a clear and unobstructed path to the working space, and that any doors or gates that provide access to the working space must be able to open at least 90 degrees. Adequate illumination is also essential for a safe working environment. The NEC requires that the working space be illuminated with sufficient light to allow workers to see what they are doing and avoid hazards. The lighting should be positioned so that it does not cast shadows or create glare that could obscure the equipment or the working area. In addition to the specific requirements for working space, the NEC also includes general requirements for the maintenance and upkeep of electrical equipment. This includes keeping the equipment clean and free of debris, and ensuring that all components are in good working order. Regular inspections and maintenance can help to prevent problems and ensure that the equipment operates safely and reliably. It is important to note that the NEC is a minimum standard and that in some cases it may be necessary to provide more working space than is required by the code. This may be necessary, for example, if the equipment is located in a confined space or if the workers need to use bulky tools or equipment. In addition to the NEC, there may also be local codes or regulations that specify additional requirements for working space around electrical equipment. It is important to check with the local authorities to determine if there are any additional requirements that apply to your specific situation. By following the NEC requirements and any applicable local codes or regulations, you can help to ensure the safety of workers who may need to access electrical equipment for maintenance, repair, or inspection purposes. The information provided is intended for general guidance only and should not be considered a substitute for professional electrical advice. Always consult with a qualified electrician or electrical engineer before performing any electrical work.